The Filmmakers Forum is organized by the Nollywood Studies Centre of the School of Media and Communications, Pan Atlantic University. And we have with us today my good friend CJ Obasi. Good to see you again, CJ. It's been quite a while. And thank
Yes,
you
it
very
has.
much. Thank you very
Thank you.
much
My pleasure.
for agreeing to join us today. Let me welcome also our audience. Welcome. As we go along, please feel free to drop your comments or questions in the chat box and we'll take them from there. Let's get this show on the road. Well, we have with us today, as already indicated, Sijo Obasi. Sijo Obasi, also known as Fiery or the Fiery One, is a highly acclaimed Nigerian filmmaker who gained recognition with his debut feature film Ojuju, a zero-budget film that premiered at the African National Film Festival, AFRIF, in 2014. The film received the Best Nigerian Film Award and went on to screen at over 40 film festivals worldwide. Ojuju has become a cult classic and even caught the attention of a major Hollywood studio for a series adaptation. CJ's second feature, Old Town, a crime thriller art house piece, was showcased at AFRIF and the Gothenburg Film Festival. The film earned nominations at the Screen Nation Awards and the Africa Movie Academy Awards AMA. His short film, Hello Rain, based on a story by renowned author Nnedi Okorafor, gained global recognition, premiering at the Oscar qualifying international competition of the Kurzfilmtage Oberhausen. The film screened at numerous festivals and received accolades, including recognition from CNN and BBC for its contribution to African futurism and fantasy. Obasi's creative influence extends beyond his filmmaking. He co-founded the Surreal 16 Collective alongside fellow filmmakers Abba T. Makama and Michael Omodua. This collaboration resulted in two anthology projects, Visions and Juju Stories. The latter, a three-part anthology, features film exploring urban and mythical tales in contemporary Lagos, received acclaim at the Lokamo Film Festival and was released across Africa. Juju Stories found its way to Amazon Prime Video's global platform. His latest endeavor is a female uh, driven black and white fantasy film, Mami Wata, that received acclaim at the Sundance Film Festival and FESPACO. The film's international production involved contributors from multiple African, American, and European countries. There, ladies and gentlemen, we have CJ Obasi. CJ, once again, you're welcome. You have done quite a
Thank you,
lot
Prof.
since the last time we had you here on our
Yeah,
campus. We were privileged to have
that
CJ
was.
here on our campus.
What
It's
year was this?
oh, I think this was
2016.
2015 or 16 exactly. I think it was six.
Yeah,
That's quite a while ago.
yeah.
Quite a while ago. So great, good to have you.
Thank you,
Let's
Prof.
go to the beginning. You studied computer science, CJ, but you have ended up in filmmaking. How did this come
Yeah.
about? Let's start from the beginning there.
Hmm. Well, I grew up in Owerri, so I don't know. Owerri is kind of like it, at least growing up in the 90s in Owerri, it's kind of like its own small town, like its own world outside of everything else happening. I mean, we knew what was happening in the rest of the country thanks to television, NTA, and all of that, but to a large extent, Owerri was really its own world. So if there was film school or any of that going on in other parts of the world, I had no idea. I had no clue whatsoever. So um, not going to school wasn't an option in my house. Like not having a degree was not an
Yeah.
option in my house. Um, but I always knew that I wanted to make films, and I figured, I have to get a degree, so I might as well get a degree, you know, with something that didn't feel like I was going to school in a way because I already liked computers then. In fact, um, as early as 17 or 18, I was already programming. I was already a programmer. So,
Right.
doing, studying computer science felt like it would be a breeze, and it was to a large extent. But yeah, that was how I got into, studying computer science versus studying film. Um, But in the end, film still won because I had to go back to my first love.
Great. But if I may put it in this way, the style of filmmaking, okay, you have, I would say, carved out a niche for yourself, quite different from the well-trodden route that the generality of filmmakers in Nigeria have taken. What has led you along this path? What have been your influences, so to
Hmm.
speak?
I think growing up in Owerri has a lot to do with that. But not just growing up in Owerri, growing up the way I grew up in Owerri. I grew up in a very specific way, in a small community, academic community. Um, Books were a big thing growing up, literature, reading, um, just engaging with the arts was a big thing. I remember I used to paint even as a child, and I would be encouraged to do that. As a child, I used to read all kinds of books, even books that were like way above, um, my that I should have had no business reading as a child. But I was encouraged to do all of that. There was no book or art that was too advanced, you know, for me when I grew up. So I really absorbed everything. In fact, even as a child, I started watching horror films really early. And I mean, at first they wouldn't let me, but I think I showed a kind of maturity by the time I saw The Evil Dead, and I didn't freak out.
Oh,
So they figured, like he's fine. He's not. He's fine. He can handle it. So after that, everything was pretty much good to go for me at that point. But yeah, I think all of those things, the books, the literature, the movies, the art, all of that helped shape the way I would approach filmmaking when I eventually became a filmmaker.
you have just mentioned horror, and the horror genre is rather prominent in your body of work. Is there a reason for this?
Um, I wouldn't say it's rather prominent because I mean, if you think about it, I've only made like one clean cut horror film, which is Ujiji, and my first feature. Um, Old Town wasn't a horror film. Hello Rain was my short film wasn't a horror film. You might say there's a bit of horror in my segment in Juju Stories, but we don't. I mean, we have to call Juju Stories a horror film because you kind of have to. It's the genre that you have to classify it in. But I always say that Juju Stories is more like a supernatural anthology than a horror anthology. Because it's not really the intention is not to scare you. It makes you uneasy and it does scare some people for sure, but the style and the tonality behind it is intended to not scare you, but to create
Right.
this ambience of unease. So that
Right.
is what a supernatural film would do. So, like, if you think about it that way, and certainly Mami Water is not a horror film at all, you know. So, but I will always say that horror film is the reason why I got into filmmaking. Because again, um, Evil Dead was the first film, like at least first film that was imprinted in my memory, in my mind. Um, and I just remember how visually powerful it was watching it as a child. How a lot of, I mean, now I understand the cinematic language of the film like Evil Dead, but then what moved me was how I sat down to watch it as a child, and I wanted to see the monsters or the creatures that were advertised, by my elder siblings, like this is the scariest movie and all of that. And I just remember sitting to see that, and I never saw that because the entire movie you don't see any creatures, you don't see any monsters. All you see is this evil presence. You actually see the POV of the camera chasing people and following the
Yeah.
would-be victims and so on and so forth, and then possessing them, and then they would turn against each other and attack each other. But you would never see the actual demon or spirit, whatever, that is causing all of these things. And so for me, that kind of imprinted this, what I would later on realize is visual storytelling, just the ability to show and not tell. And I think that really makes a difference in my kind of filmmaking, because I will always lean towards the visuals rather than, the dialogue, rather than the thing that is being said.
And actually that is well something that has been said about a lot of our Nigerian films, which is that they tend to be very dialogue heavy.
Mm.
So I think this, yeah, you have taken a bit of a different path in this. Now, one publication has described you as a genre auteur that became a creative outcast. Is this a description that you would agree with? And
Um,
really, what does it mean to begin with?
yeah, I was going to say, like, what does that? Because um, I honestly do not think of myself as an outcast, because I wear the badge of Nigerian filmmaker with honor. I think that gives me a specific point of view that no one will ever take away from me, no matter where I am or wherever I make film. If I make some big Hollywood movie, just because I'm a Nigerian filmmaker, I'll always bring a perspective to that kind of filmmaking that nobody else can bring, you know. But that being said, I do have issues with the terminology Nollywood, and how it is used. And that might be where I started to have issues with core not, practitioners, even though in my mind, it's not an issue. It just has to do with how it came about, how the word came about, and how it
Right.
is used to box every single kind of expression that comes out of Nollywood. It just never made sense to me that way. It was never to make myself an outcast or to attack anybody. Definitely not that. I'm proud of Nollywood, and I say that everywhere I go to. I'm proud of what we've accomplished, how we've been able to put ourselves in the center, and tell our stories when nobody else would do that. My one gripe is this is how the name came about, right? First of all, you have to remember, you know, that we've had cinema in the 70s.
Right.
We've had Ola Balogun, we've had Hubert Ogunde, we've had Adelov, we had Eddie Warmer, we've had all these people making films in the 70s and in the 80s, right? So the history of Nigerian cinema didn't start with VHS in 1992.
Right.
We've had a Nigerian cinema that existed before that. The only issue is that it wasn't allowed to thrive and to create its own identity, like other climes were allowed, other countries were allowed to do, whether due to economy or due to politics or whatever. Ours did not. We didn't. It wasn't afforded the time to become its own identity, right?
Yes.
And so you had a long period of time where nothing existed as far as cinema or as far as filmmaking from a Nigerian perspective. It just wasn't there for at least over a decade before living in bondage came. And so to start the definition of our history as that, I've always had an issue with that, because you're basically
Wiping
wiping
out.
out what has come before. That's number
Yes.
one. And then the number two is that the name Nollywood itself came from, a reporter who came to Nigeria, I think it was 98 or 99, who came to Nigeria, New Yorker report journalist, and he saw how films were being made, in the East, in Enugu, in Asaba, and all of that. And he said, look, and Lagos as well. He said, these guys, they're doing something crazy here. They are making films with $10,000 or less, and they are churning it out on a weekly basis. This is crazy. And he called it Nollywood, because, as a play on the word Hollywood.
Yeah.
But for some reason, that word just kind of stuck. But it was used in a kind of, oh, this is cute way,
Yeah.
not as a way to big us up. So what you had is us taking that name and deciding that we're going to run with it, which is fine because the people have they have the prerogative to make their own identity, to create their own identity, however they like. But I always have that issue. It's kind of like the N word. You will have, I'll always have issues with, Africans or Black Americans or whatever using the N word. It doesn't matter to me. But
Right.
because of how it comes, the origins of it, I will always have an issue with it. But we have decided to make it our own thing, right, and run with that. That's the same thing with Nollywood. I will always have an issue because of how it came, but we've decided to make an issue to make something of it and run with it. However, in this case, this is about art and this is about expression. And so, if you've decided that that's what you want our brand to be, someone else can decide. I think a country with 200 million plus people, we can do something else. We can offer other kinds of expression. And I don't think it's a radical thing to say. I never thought it was a radical thing to say. But I realized that coming out in 2014, 15 as a young filmmaker that nobody knew about and saying that, it just sounded so problematic at the time. Nowadays, people kind of get, what I was trying to say all the while, but then it was such an abominable thing to say, at the time.
Very good point. Very good point. And actually, I do think that it's it's a perspective that many other people have raised. There are quite a few people also who are not fully comfortable with that term. But like you have said, it's a name that has stuck and is now up to us, perhaps, to make of that name what we want. But
Yes.
I do see a beat. You haven't expressed it so strongly here, but I did read something of yours in which you reacted to that term because you felt that it was being used to categorize you, and you could say categorize all the films coming from Nigeria as being of a particular type, and also as indicating a certain quality. You haven't stressed that so much in your response a moment ago, but is this also part of your reaction to that term?
Yeah, and just to add more context to that, that is no longer the case in how
Okay.
people treat me.
Okay.
But I had that issue when I was still trying to introduce myself, especially in the international film space. Because what quickly happened was when I came out in with Ojuju in 2014, and I said what I said, I'm not gonna lie, the doors closed, all the doors closed.
Oh,
Like everything just shut all around me. And I quickly realized, so you can imagine, young filmmaker, first feature, you're in the industry, all the doors are closed. And suddenly you realize, okay, if ever you wanted to be known, renowned internationally, now you don't have any choice. You have to do it now. Like there's no other option because literally all the doors in the country are closed around you, right? So um, that's when I got to work. And so what happened was at that time, once you introduce yourself, like I realized when I travel to the UK or like any country, Germany, Sweden, whatever, anytime you introduce yourself as a Nigerian filmmaker, and this is without anyone even seeing your work, no one has seen your work, they haven't heard about you, they don't know anything about you. But as soon as you introduce yourself as a Nigerian filmmaker, immediately they say, oh, Nollywood. And they say it with sort of like this condescension. They don't say it like in, oh, wow, Nollywood. They don't say it with
right.
effusiveness or with a sense of pride. They say it like, a way, to look down on you or with an expectation of what it is that you do. So I also had that experience in 2018 while we were at the Waga Film Lab and we were trying to get Mami Water made. So we were in the lab with Mami Water alongside other filmmakers from other African countries, Burkina, Senegal, Niger, Mali, Gabon, all of those countries. And they had their own projects alongside us from Nigeria with Mami Water.
Yeah.
And what we realized was that even as much as the, this is a film lab that shouldn't be um, biased or anything, but they really couldn't help giving more severity or more gravitas to the projects that came from the other countries than to us, especially when we would tell them, look, we're making a black and white film. And they're like, yeah, really? Like, of course, they wouldn't say that, but you can sense that. You can feel that energy of like, you know, okay, okay, you know. And I got the sense that if I was from Senegal, if I was from Mali, if I was from any of those countries, and I said that I was making a black and white fantasy film, nobody would bat an eye. You know what I'm saying? But the fact that people had a set um, like view of what they think I could do, I just had an issue with that. It didn't make me feel ashamed of being Nigerian. It just made me more determined to prove that we can do more as Nigerians. That like there
Yeah.
isn't one, that we shouldn't be known as one thing. So that even like kind of made me more aggressive about this whole Nigerian cinema and redefining what it means to be a Nigerian filmmaker.
Let me take you back to what you said uh, at the beginning of this. You said that when you expressed your views at the beginning, the doors closed. I mean,
Yeah.
that struck me because for a young
Yeah.
filmmaker, it's challenging enough as a young filmmaker in this country. But then when there's an active closing of doors, then you might as well throw in the towel. How did you deal with
Yeah.
that in the perspective of, well, the challenges that a young filmmaker ordinarily would face, and then these new challenges of people actively saying, no, we're going to close the door to this person? How did you deal with that? What were the issues really
Yeah.
that you had to then deal with?
It was tough. 2014, 2015, 2018, and a little bit of 2017 were the toughest years of my life. I will always say this, probably in my autobiography. This is a whole different discussion. But I would always give credit to my wife, who is my producer. I don't think I could have done it alone. Like I know I have strong will for sure because I mean I left my well-paying job in Abuja to become a filmmaker, moved to Lagos, all of that. I mean I do have some will. I'm not gonna discredit myself or anything, but this you have to realize that I'm not built. I wasn't first of all I wasn't born in Lagos, right?
Yeah.
I was born. I'm a small town guy. I grew up in a small town where everyone virtually knows each other, right? I'm not built the way Lagosians are built, that hustle thing. I will hustle for my craft to get my work seen, to get my art seen, to get my vision, you know, delivered the way I want it. But all these hustling thing, the way there's a different mindset. I'm not like, I'm not coming for Lagosians or anything, but it's just a different world. And I realized that
Yeah.
quickly when I came to Lagos, and I realized that a lot of the filmmaking that goes on in Lagos and the way the industry in Lagos is structured has more to do with, positioning, branding, how you look, how you're perceived, the things you say, all the things that have nothing to do with the actual filmmaking. And so I always had an issue with that. But as soon as I came in and saw that's okay, that's how you guys roll, I figured, okay, I'm just gonna keep my head down and make movies. That turned out to be another like problematic thing to do. Because I just thought that all you had to do was just focus on your filmmaking, but apparently not. That became a problem as well. So it really was tough. I don't think I would have done it if I didn't have a producer as my life partner on that journey. Um, but to be honest, I look back on those years and I wonder how the heck we did it because you have to remember I left my job. I didn't have a side gig. I wasn't doing anything else. I wasn't like, I wasn't doing filmmaking and something else. Like even the people who were like willing to crush us, they were way better off than us. You know what I mean? Like financially, like in society, things like that. Like they were like, so it never made sense to me why it would come from little me. Like all I just wanted to do was make
Yeah.
movies. and so, but But yeah, I'm glad those years are over for sure.
In the light of that, what kind of advice would you give a young person who is trying to break into the industry?
um, you really have to know that it's what you want. I mean, it sounds a little cliche, I think, but maybe not, because you might think you want it, but once you get into it, you might realize that maybe I don't really want it as much as I thought I did. Because if you're an outsider looking in on this, looking in at this thing we do, it looks very nice. It looks very shiny.
Yeah,
It looks very
true.
cool.
Mm,
And I'm not saying it's not, because it does have its moments, right? But if you're going to do it at a certain level, right? If you're going to do it at a certain level that commands real respect, not pretense respect, but real respect. Because real respect has to do with the craft. It has nothing to do with anything else. It has to do with the craft of it, right? Where people can look at the craft, and even if they hate your guts, they will always recognize the craft of it. So if you want to do something at
right.
that level, you're going to have to make sacrifices, right? Sound like Oga Kana now, right? But you have to make sacrifices, right? You really have to. There's no other way. And it's it depends on how much you're willing, like your threshold for pain and endurance. And I'm not using these words on like just flippantly. I'm not like exaggerating. Like there's going to be a lot of pain. There's going to be a lot of just struggles, a lot of hunger strikes, literal hunger strikes, all of those things. However bad you think it is, that's what it is, and probably even more. And you're going to go through all of that because you're trying to do something, right? If you're not trying to do something, then fine, it gets easier. It really does. If you're not trying to do anything, if you're just trying to make films, like just make films, that's your intention. You're not trying to do anything. You're not trying to create anything. You're not trying to say something. You can pretty much get by, right? But if you're trying to do something, if you're trying to make a statement about something and you have a voice, then that's when it gets a little tricky. And for young people who think they have a voice or who think they have something they want to say, you really have to make sure that you want it, because it's not going to be given to you. It's not going to be handed to you, especially in a country like Nigeria. I mean, the reason why I say this is because just from a very realistic point of view, if you make a movie like Mami, okay, let's even start with Ojuju. If you make a movie like Ojuju, right, with no money, which we did, no money, right, and it goes on to do what Ojuju did, you shouldn't have to look for support to make your next one. In an ideal setting, in any other country other than Nigeria, right? But that's not the case. In fact, after Ojuju, the doors closed, like I said, it became even worse, right? And then we made the second, and then it was like, oh, people are like, oh, how did they manage to make the second, right? And then the third, which took like 7 years between the second and to make. And everyone believed Mami Water was an impossibility. No one thought it would ever be made. Like all the forces, living and dead, tried to ensure the movie not being made. At some point, we were begging people to take our money for equipment while we were in Benin. We were begging, we had the money for equipment and we were begging people to give us equipment. Nobody wanted to give us equipment. It
Oh,
didn't make any sense. So, like, I can tell you stories and stories, but that's not what this is about. What I'm trying to say is that if you're on a certain path and you decided that this is the path and this is you want to say this, you're going to make a few enemies. That's for sure. But it's up to you to decide how much you want to be preoccupied with that and more occupied with your craft and how much you're willing to endure. for the sake of your craft and for the sake of the preservation of your voice.
I must confess, that sounds pretty rough. I mean, what you
It
guys had to
is.
go
It
through,
is.
it sounds
And it's
very
the
rough
truth. I'm
indeed.
not going to. I'm not going to garnish it with, like, because there's a lot of young people, I'm assuming, who are in this room listening now. So I'm not going to garnish it and feed you a line that where I tell you, oh, it's amazing, just go out, do whatever. I'm going to tell you my own experience. It wasn't amazing. I didn't get the support. I didn't get the backing. I didn't get any of that. For the most part, it was just me and my wife, and we had to go the long road, the long journey, the long path, and we had to endure a lot of ridicule even. Yes, a lot of ridicule and a lot of just people actually going out of their way to put stumbling blocks in your path. Like, not even on some, oh, just let him do his thing, because that would have been better. That would have been better if everyone just left us alone. Like, yes, they think they know it all. Just let them do their thing. That would have been better if they did that. But no, a lot of people, a lot of very powerful people who would even admit it, who have admitted it to us now, that they went out of their way to block our paths. So we weren't being paranoid when we thought all of that was happening, because you sense it, you feel it at the time. You literally feel the doors being shut. At some point, you start to ask yourself, am I being paranoid? And some people will try to gaslight you and tell you that no, it's not really happening. You're just imagining things. Until those people come out years later and tell you that that's what they were doing. Then you realize you weren't being paranoid.
I'm sorry to probe a little further on this one. It just strikes me really as very curious. Is
Yeah.
it such reactions of actively creating obstacles? Is that due to seeing a young upcoming filmmaker as a threat, or, well, as a threat either personally or a threat to the system?
I mean, I have a few of my theories. Um, one of such people actually told me that, look, that having come to know me now, that he realizes that I'm not as I'm trying to remember the exact adjective he used, but I think he's something like, I'm not as cocky or something. I'm not sure the adjective, but something in the around that vein, that I'm not as cocky as people say I am, but I'm just confident in my craft. This is what he said, and but it takes people to get to know me to realize that when I talk, it's not about, like, I'm not trying to pull anybody down, but it's just me talking about my craft in a confident way. That's what the guy was saying, and so it made me think: is that what people think about me? That I'm like this cocky guy who thinks he's better than everyone else or whatever? And it just never made sense to me because, first of all, I don't even go out. Like, I literally don't go out. I'm always inside the house watching a movie, writing, right? So where did they even meet me to know how cocky I am? That's the first thing. Second thing, like I said, I just want to make movies. you know, all I ever wanted to do as a young guy coming into the industry was to make films. So how does that bother you? But like, just being realistic, I started to realize that when you're out there living your life without apologies, as you should, right? As you should.
Mhm.
We are all supposed to live our lives unapologetically, and our art, we're supposed to create our art unapologetically. But when you're out there doing that, some people might have an issue with that. Some people might actually think that, you know, you're making them look bad by
Right,
living your life authentically.
right.
And I mean, it sucks, but you went, imagine that being a lesson I had to learn really early, first, second year into film, like professionally into film. And I had resigned my day job, and there was no going back. So that was a rude awakening for me. And I don't want to like sugarcoat it when someone asks me what advice do I have for younger or upcoming filmmakers. I never want to sugarcoat that, because I think I'm doing you a favor by telling you the truth and being honest about it, rather than you having to have that rude awakening, because it is a
Yeah.
shocking awakening when you do something and you think that you're going to, have people rally around you, support you, help you up, help you, lead you through the way and all that path, and they just put you out in the cold. And not only do they put you out in the cold, they put you out in the cold and they turn up the temperature of the cold. you know,
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
that was a rude awakening for sure. But I think it made me stronger ultimately, because what happens is once you go through that, then you really don't need anybody, like for real. And then what can they do now? You see? So it's like it's a good thing if you can go through it, but I would rather you be prepared for it, one way or the other.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, CJ. I think what you said earlier captures it very well, that if you have a message to put across, you need to be committed enough and willing to go hungry to defend that message and
Yeah,
stand by it.
yeah.
Otherwise, great. Okay, I have a question here from Omoyefe, and it goes, looking at your journey so far, when you started and where you are now, what would you have done differently?
Mm. I've thought about that. Like maybe I could have done anything differently. Um, but to be honest with you, I did everything. I did everything I thought I could. I even tried to be light at some point. I did that. I did try to. I felt like maybe there's something in my upbringing that made me, because I tell you, these things will gaslight you. It will make you feel like you're not as nice. And I know that my mom raised me to be a very polite person, right? My parents raised me to be a very polite person. I grew up in a small town. We talk to each other. We don't have
Yeah.
this get up with our neighbor the way it is in big cities like Lagos.
Yeah.
Um, so at some point, I thought maybe if I like tried or reached out more and tried to do stuff collaboratively, it would work. I mean, I did reach out and ended up doing something with Genevieve and Naji. Um, did something with Charles Play and Ramsey Noah, Living in Bondage sequel. Um, but that's really as far as it went with collaborating with what you might call mainstream Nollywood. Um, you would think that after that it would be more and more, but none of that, none of those offers came, like literally none after that. I mean, I was supposed to do something else with Genevieve, but it just kind of fell apart. But after that, it just seemed like, they're like, he does his thing a certain way. Because every time I reach, okay, like, let's do something together. It's like, but you have your own way of doing things. Like, but why is that like your first reaction, like your first response to me reaching out,
Yeah.
And then it just became weird after a certain point. I think from 2008, 2019, it just became weird after that. Like, even people that you would have those kinds of conversations with weren't even like reaching out anymore. Like, they were like, he does his own thing. Like, he just living be. And if somebody else wanted to reach out through them, they would tell them, don't bother. So it just became weird after that. And then, we started looking for like new people. So everyone that ended up doing Mami Water with us from Nigeria, there were a lot of them new people who were not like plugged into the system. And then of course we had like mostly international collaborators as well. So that just kind of made me realize that, at the end of the day, film is film, cinema is cinema. As long as I get to create what I want to create, just keep it moving.
Right. Thank you. I have another question here from this time from Toby, who says, for people without a background in creative arts, for example, like someone who
Mm.
studied law, what would be your advice to break into the industry or gain practical experience, especially when you have tried to reach out or have participated in a few creative academies?
Mm. I can only answer that question based on my own experience, because like I said, or even as was read, I studied computer science. I have a degree in computer science from the UNN. And listen, if you want to make films and you love film, you really love film, and you have something to say, you're going to figure out a way to do it, because the love will so overwhelm you. I think it was Quentin Tarantino that said something like that as well. You know, he said, because he used to be like he used to be I think he used to work in a video rental shop, even though that kind of is still within the film world, but he wasn't making movies, and he used to work in the video rental house. And he said he didn't go to film school, but he said that if you love film enough and you study film enough, mind you, whether you go to film school or not, you have to study film. Like
Right.
that's the foundation from whence all good things come. So
Mm.
even though I didn't go to the four walls, the four institutions of a film school, but I've studied film. I've studied film all my life, and I'm still studying film. I still study film, and I still approach film as a student. I still approach film with that sense of awe, like it has something to teach me that I didn't know before. And I think as long as you have that, you will be a good filmmaker, or you'll be on the path to be a good filmmaker. But if you approach it like it's like something you can just tick the boxes, and don't get me
Right.
wrong, there are technical aspects of filmmaking, just like with anything else. You can learn about, this, how to structure a script, how to write it. You can learn what a camera does, how to light. All of these are technical things. But until you approach the craft of filmmaking from the heart, from the feeling, from the sense, from the emotion, from the instinct, you're not going to be able to create anything that is worth anything. I mean, it can fizzle out, but to really make something of worth, which is, I think, is what you would like to do, you have to approach it from the heart, and you have to study the craft of it daily and daily and daily and daily, and then practice it. Like I, I think between the time that I left my day job and when I made Ojuju, a lot of people don't know. Even though I've said this in several interviews, I've made so many films that failed, like not features or anything, like shorts and things. I've made several of them. They failed before I made Ojuju. So by the time I was making Ojuju, it was like, this is it. I was putting everything on the line, because if I failed, with that as well, I don't know if I could have kept going. So I think all of those failures were kind of like my film school, because you can't learn it until you do it,
Right.
right? So that would be my advice for someone who doesn't have the background, like the formal background, and like I didn't have either. So study it, learn it, have reverence for it, and then you practice it. You have to practice it.
I guess that's rather like the advice that's usually given. If you want to learn how to swim, jump into the water and start swimming. You
Absolutely.
get you get
Absolutely.
yourself wet. Okay, let me
Yep.
take you back to something you said earlier. When you spoke about Ojuju, you said you had no budget. And usually when people talk about Ojuju, they say it has a zero budget. What exactly does that mean? Does it mean that you didn't pay out
It
anything?
really
Or
means what it. Yes, that literally people always ask, like, what does zero budget mean? Does it mean yes? It means zero budget. Like we didn't have any money, literally going into the shoot. While we were shooting, trickles would come in here and there, but literally going into the shoot, we had nothing. right? All we had was a script, right? And a few friends. And then, okay, was my girlfriend at the time. She just had contacts because she was working in the industry, right? And she reached out to people. She was the one who reached out to even the actors. She reached out to Kelechi Deme. She reached out to Gabriel Afolayan. She, and a few other people. And then, Amalmi came on board. Amalmi Dada, Meg Otanwa. And I had conversations with all of these people one on one. I had to pitch them the project one on one, right? And mind you, this was me. I didn't have anything to show before then. Like I didn't like it was just me, just from nowhere, saying that look, I want to make essentially a zombie film, right? Just think how crazy that sounded. But I think my passion was infectious, or at least I like to think it was, because they agreed to do it for no money, at least until the movie got released, and then they would get paid. So, which was what happened. So everything that was done, even the crew members, everyone pretty much worked pro bono until the movie got paid, and then everyone got paid. But that's just crazy. If you think about it, like just
Yeah.
being able to assemble a team with with an inexperienced filmmaker, virtually no experience, because I had, like I said, I had made a bunch of shorts, which no one will ever see. But I had all of these like theoretical knowledge of how to make a feature film, a little bit of practice. I had a kick-ass producer, who was my girlfriend, and believed in me. And then I had these actors who were willing to take risks. And of course, crew members, who brought their equipment and things like that. But that's really how we made the film. I mean, I think we shot Ojuju in 11 days. Yeah, and we shot it in a slum in Ikeja. Funny enough, crazy. We shot the scene in a slum in Ikeja. And then I did a lot of establishment like B-roll in Bariga under the Third Mainland Bridge and nearly got mobbed by a gang of Agberos. So like it was just a crazy thing to make a film like that. But yeah, this is um, it was a zero budget. When we say zero budget, we mean zero budget. Yeah.
I think what you just said adds to the response you gave to Toby earlier for someone who's just going into the field. The thing of
Mm.
counting on people who can contribute to the project without necessarily being paid, at least at that time. Because I know that that's some
Mm-hmm.
advice that people give. Well, whatever it is you can do, you have friends with different skills. Well, bring them into the picture because then it's mutually
Right.
supportive and so on. Okay, now
And just to
Olukoya.
add,
Yes, please.
sorry, Prof. So just to add, it really is a crazy thing to ask people because you know it's these people's livelihood, right? Like to ask someone to do their job, like to do what they do to earn a living
Yes.
and not get paid immediately. It's a mad thing to ask of anyone, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
with that being said, when you are coming up as a young filmmaker and you can find such people, that would be the way to go. Because think about it, you are all trying to get put on, right? You're all trying to get put on. How else are you going to do it? No one is going to give you $1 million to make your movie. So how else are you going to do it if you don't come together, band together, collaborate, and create something, and not worry about the money while you are creating? How else are you going to do it? Like, think about it. So
Yeah.
if you can find that, do it. You know, yeah, for sure.
Okay. I have two questions here linked to what you said about having some films that failed at the beginning. I think both of them can be taken together. Olukoya says, when you say you have made films that have failed before Juju, what do you mean? In what manner are they failed movies? And Jide says, how did you
Oh,
manage the failure? Were you able to share all your works, both the ones you think failed and the successful ones?
They failed just because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. Like you shoot something is it's like either out of frame or out of focus here. The sound is bad. Sound was always a strong struggle because you never know. We didn't know how to get good sound with the way Nigeria is like there's always noise, neighbors shouting, the generator on. Like there was just too many things, right, to deal with, right? And then just the technical aspect of it. I think the artistic side, I was still figuring it out. But when the technical side overwhelms the artistic side, even the artistic side doesn't have the chance to shine, right? So like I made a few shorts like that. I made a documentary that I really liked. I'm sure it's probably somewhere, but I did it for a girl my brother wanted to marry at the time. She was a medical doctor, and she had this NGO that would run like health, like medical outreaches in like remote areas in the southeast. And I remember going with her on one of those things. I told her I wanted to go with her, and she said, "Yeah, sure, come, bring your camera." And I didn't have a camera at the time, but I borrowed a camera. I borrowed the camera from my cousin who has like a studio that makes jingles and things like that. And they had this and this was in as his studio is in Omo, so and I was in Owerri. So I went to Omo to pick up this P2 camera. I think a
Mm,
Panasonic camera. It's like one of these old cameras, but it was using like these small DV tapes.
yes.
Um, and I remember going to that very remote village in Abia State. It's very remote, like this one of these villages that they don't have electricity and they still have like myths about like giant pythons and things. Like literally, you would go to their what they call their evil forest or sacred forest or whatever, and you would see like the prince. Is it the prince of the python? Like the path that the python
Mm,
has
yes.
in the forest. It was spooky as hell, But that's where I went to and shot this documentary about this village. They don't have water, they don't have lights, and they went to do a medical outreach there. I like this documentary, even though it's very rough around the edges, but I liked it because, I just went there, ragtag, one man crew with this camera on my shoulder. I shot everything on the DV tape, came back, went to my cousin's studio, had the DV tape converted to digital before doing the edit. And I had this early version of Premiere, and that was really my first time diving into like really editing. Um, so yeah, like when I say failure, I mean failure in the term that maybe the output wasn't great or isn't great,
Yeah.
but it wasn't a failure in that it did what it was intended to do, which was to, strengthen my hands, strengthen my craft, and to make me more confident into eventually making a juju.
Right. Thank you. Well, Denzel, I see your hand up. If you have a comment or question, please put it in the chat box and we'll take it from there. Well, I have a question from Abdul Khalili, or Abdul Khalils, I'm sorry, who says, "Hello, CJ. Does it feel like your deserved recognition is coming at the right time? Do you feel that you would have been prepared for this recognition if you had got it immediately after your first feature?"
That's a great question, Abdul. I think it came at the perfect time. I think everything that has happened to me happened just when it was supposed to happen, right? For example, Sundance. I've wanted to go to Sundance my entire life, well, at least as far as I've known Sundance, right? But I always knew that Ojuju wasn't going to be that movie. I never applied for Sundance. I never submitted a single film to Sundance until I made Mami Water. So like there's always like I've always believed in timing. I've always believed in waiting. I'm a very patient guy. Always been. Um, and I always believe in the adage that says the patient dog eats the fattest bone. I've always believed in that adage. And it's certainly true when it comes to cinema. Because the thing about waiting for your turn is that you get better. at it so that when it eventually gets to be your turn, you knock it out of the park. So yes, I think it's happening at the right time. And now I'm more equipped to handle the things that are happening. Like going to Sundance was such a crazy thing because people literally go from Sundance to making, their $10 million movie or their $20 million movie, or even like whatever, like I think it was Ryan Gosling literally went from his Sundance movie to making Creed. Like Sundance is such a life-changing thing. And I remember how it felt being there and then the things that happened after. And just thinking how the specificity of my growth as a filmmaker has helped me to manage all of this that is happening. So yes, I do believe in that it's happening when it should.
Okay, thank you, CJ. Still along the line of aspiring filmmakers, Joel says, "Thank you, CJ, for generously sharing your valuable insights and experiences. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. My question is directed towards your advice for aspiring filmmakers like myself, especially in light of the challenges posed by the current state of the Nigerian distribution system. This system often appears to be structured in a manner that presents significant barriers for emerging filmmakers seeking access to theaters and major streaming platforms such as Netflix and
Mm.
Amazon."
Sorry,
Let me add, I'm sorry,
what's my
let me add to, yes, well, he's asking what's your advice for aspiring filmmakers in the light of this challenge posed by the distribution system.
yeah. I mean, the Nigerian distribution system has gone through quite a lot. I mean, if you think about it, we started with VHS, and and I think that has been the most successful we've ever had as far as the VHS Nollywood era. Because think about it, everyone had a VHS player in their house at the time, and everybody watched Nollywood films. Everybody bought VHS cassettes and watched Nollywood films as they were coming out. So even then, I mean, obviously, as the industry grew and became this hugely profitable venture for the marketers, greed set in, right? And then that's when everything went downhill. As soon as greed sets in, everything goes downhill. And the piracy, people felt like, oh, it's not enough to make 200 million naira per movie. Now we want to make 500 million. So now they are pirating the thing, right? And then they're like, oh, why do I have to pay the director this amount of money? I can just do it myself. Then the marketers started becoming directors. And then what happened? They're like, oh, these actors, these superstar actors, the likes of Genevieve, Rita Dominic, Aaron, all those, legends, they were so huge. And the marketers felt like they were too huge. They were being paid too much. Greed again. And they what's the word? They banned them, right? And that also took a hit on the market because those were literally the people that the audience wanted to see in movies. And you're going to ban them,
Yeah.
right? So all of these things contributed to the failure of the Nigerian market, right? And so after that hit, the market struggled to try and win back the audience. And then the Nigerian cinema industry came. And then suddenly there was a new awakening. Like we can go out to the cinemas the same way we go to watch, Hollywood movies. We can go out to the cinemas and watch
Mm.
our films. And then there was a failure on the producer's part to give them films that gave them enough reason to go out to the cinemas. Because you're like, why am I paying the same amount of money that I'm paying to see the Avengers? Like it doesn't balance. You see, like it doesn't balance out. Like, in fact, sometimes in Nigerian films, you're paying more to see the Avengers. Again, greed. Why are you charging the same thing if you're not going to give the same experience? You see what I'm saying? Or even more you're charging in some cases. So like a lot of these things, I feel it's part failure of the structure, whether it's distribution or the exhibitors or whatever. But at the same time, I can't really blame them, right? Because they are operating in a very hostile environment. A lot of the things that other economies don't worry about, we have to worry about it here,
Yeah.
right? We have to worry about every single thing. We have to worry about security. We have to worry about light. We have to worry about everything because you have to provide everything. So a distributor is not just a distributor because he's doing these other things. An exhibitor is not just an exhibitor because he's doing these other things. And so that trickles down and has a domino effect across the board to the producer, to the filmmaker, to the actor who gets paid, down all the way down to the production assistant. Because if the producer makes a movie for X amount of money and he puts it in the cinema, and the cinema is going to take this amount of money because he has to pay for all these other things,
Right.
minus the actual exhibition. And the distributor has to take X amount of money because he has to pay for these other things, minus the actual distribution. You realize that at the end of the day, the money that is trickling down to the producer is only this amount of money. And on top of that, he has to pay taxes. And on top of that, he has to pay his investors or high investors. So like, and then that affects how much he's paying the actors and affects how much the production assistants and every other person further down the line gets paid.
Yeah.
So it's a whole chain that is being affected because of this one thing that can be fixed. But there's really very little you can do as a filmmaker except do the work that the audience feels is worth their time. That for me is where I think that I cannot fail as a filmmaker. If because it's on me to do that, right? It's on me to create the kind of work that deserves the audience's time to go to the cinema and watch, or to tune in, whether on Netflix or Amazon or whatever, and watch. Because now we are so bombarded by content. And I hate to use the word content, but that's what it is. Because in this age that we're in, it's all zeros and ones. Whether you're making high cinema or you're making a skit on TikTok, it's all zeros and ones as far as the content world is concerned. And so all of these things are being consumed the same way and pretty much by the same audience, the skits and the high art. So what you have to do, the responsibility falls on you as the filmmaker to create work that not only stands out, but that is worth anyone's time. At least that's how I see it.
Okay. Thank you, CJ. I think the point about providing the due quality is key. Like a friend of mine likes to say, people go to the cinemas or watch films to be entertained, and we have to be able to give them the kind of
Yes,
entertainment that they want.
yes, and an
They don't
experience. Yes,
exactly.
you have to
So
give them an
that leads
experience.
to
It's like,
yes.
and that's the thing that I want to use this opportunity. I have to plug, otherwise my producer is going to kill me. I have to plug. I have to talk. Mami Water is going to be released in the cinemas September 8th, right? And please don't tell me you're waiting for when it comes to Netflix or when it comes to Prime. Don't wait. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to yourself. I think I'm in a safe place to say at this point, after what Mami Water has done in the film festival space, the deals we've been able to acquire, and even the things yet to come that we haven't announced yet, I can safely say that Mami Water is going in the books, right? It's going to go into the books as far as the book of Nigerian cinema. I can comfortably say that now, right? That being said, you don't want to look back 5, 10 years from now when Mami Water is being discussed, that it was released in the cinema September 8th. and you didn't see it, but you were there. You didn't see it when it was in the cinemas. You don't want to be that guy. Don't be that guy who didn't go out to the cinemas to watch Mami Water when it was in the cinemas in Nigeria. Because it's not going to happen again. There's never going to be another Mami Water in the cinemas in Nigeria again. This is it. When it comes out to in Netflix or Prime, and that's further down the line, by the way. So don't wait for that. That's further down the line. It's not going to be the same experience because the movie is really made to be experienced in the cinema. And this is something that I'm proud of when it comes to Mami Water. If I failed in any other thing as far as the film is concerned, I didn't fail with this. I didn't fail in creating an immersive cinematic experience for the audience as far as the four walls of the theater. It's not just a movie that is made like that was produced and then we are going to project it on a big screen. No, it's an immersive cinema experience, visually and sonically. And you want to look back years from now and go, yes, I caught it in the cinema when it was shown. So I'm done.
Well, you have one convert. Toby has said, I will be at the cinema. He said that here.
Thanks, bro.
Great. Now, you are quoted, CJ, in an interview as saying that your aim is to celebrate African myths and storytelling by viewing them through an African lens, unencumbered by the Western gaze. Can you tell us some more about this, especially today when we are all speaking so much about the need to tell African stories, well, from really our perspective. And we're also talking a lot about decolonization of our stories, etc., etc. So really, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, like it's really my life aspiration, and it really has always been. Even when I made Ojuju, it was if you boil it down, Ojuju is basically a zombie film but from a Nigerian perspective. So like you don't use the word zombie, you use the word Ojuju because that's us, that's our thing, that's what we know, that's our legend, that's our
Mm.
mythos, right? Zombie is belongs there, but Ojuju we know it's part of us. So that has always been kind of my aspiration. Obviously, over the years, as I grew as a filmmaker and got older, I realized, I refined my voice. I refined how I wanted to do that and how I wanted to say that from that very unique perspective. And just like I said, that perspective is something nobody will ever take away from me. That's the perspective no one will ever take away from you. If you grew up in Lagos, if you grew up in, I don't know, Yanobaja or whatever, like that's a perspective. If you grew up in Enugu, if you anywhere, that's a perspective. And you bring that into your storytelling. And we all have experienced our mythology. We all have experienced our, spirituality, our traditions, our culture. We all have different experiences of these things that make up our identity, that make up who we are as people. You know, the thing that I think that happened with the Nigerian cinema or the Nigerian or Nollywood even was at some point we started to separate the culture from who we are. And you can't do that. You cannot separate the people from their culture. I mean, you can, but what you have a fragmented reality that you're depicting on screen. And people cannot relate with that or connect with that on a global, universal level because culture, as much as it is specific, as much as it is specific to a people, to a place and a time, it's also very universal because it is about identity, it is about the people, which is why you watch Indian movies and you have no clue what they are saying, but you can connect with it, right? And you watch Korean films, you feel the same, Japanese, Chinese, doesn't matter. It's the same. And these people, they don't disconnect themselves from their culture in their storytelling, in their visual representation. And that's just what I feel. I've always felt about, I've always felt the need to do as far as our storytelling. And people have this ideology that culture has to do with, like, like it means making epic films. That's not what it means. I mean, not really, but it means like really digging into the depths of identity and those questions about self and about who you are versus where your place in the world today. And I think all of those questions kind of came together in a very coherent way within Mami Water. Because there you have the exploration of that dichotomy and who we are as people versus who the world sees us as versus who we should be, you know. And those are more interesting questions to me to explore through cinema than just the idea of genre. Because genre, anybody can do genre. Anybody can anybody can make a movie about somebody's parents getting killed and they come after the killer. Like anybody can do genre. Genre is about tropes. It's about established tropes. You can take those tropes, you can make it a million ways. It's the same thing. It's just a regurgitation of the same thing, but then with different characters, different locations, different whatever. Same thing. But when it comes to ideas, ideas are fluid. Ideas can take on new life, new form, new, even like perceptions. You can take an idea because it's universal, it can have different perceptions once it's received by different people. And so that is more interesting to me than genre. Genre is just the skeleton. It's just the
Mm.
house, like the bare bones that you need to give it structure. But the ideas are really what make it come alive.
I like the way you express that, digging into the depths of self, identity.
Yeah,
And I have always thought that this was a key ingredient for the early popularity of our films, that the people were able to
absolutely.
self-identify, and I thought that that helps to grow. And quite a few people today have said that, well, they're beginning to lose interest because what you have said, this fragmentation that is taking place with person. So yes, I like the way you express that. Well, let's turn
Thank
to
you.
Uche's question. Uche says, "Hi, CJ. Are you looking at branching out of the supernatural film genre anytime soon, or that's a genre you want to be particularly known for?"
I want to be known for good films. I've done. Well, juju is not supernatural. It's more like, I mean, because the thing that causes the people to turn is bad water. It's dirty water or polluted water. So it's not supernatural in the sense that an intangible thing turned them. Old Town is not supernatural either. You could say Hello Ray, my short film, is supernatural. You could say, Juju Stories is supernatural. My segment, especially Suffer the Witch. Mami Water is definitely supernatural. Even though it's grounded in reality, it's it's a supernatural film that is organic, and I couldn't do it without making it black and white. Because the thing about the black and white and the specific black and white of Mami Water is that it grounds it in the now, in what you're seeing, in the things that you should keep your focus on. But I do have other things that are like way outside of the supernatural. I do like the supernatural, things that explore the supernatural themes, because the way I explore supernatural themes is that I start from the earth. I don't explore them just for the sake of the supernatural. I explore them from the human, then like from the three dimension to the fourth dimension, to the fifth dimension, to the sixth, seventh, whatever. But I start them from this dimension. And so it always grounds it to the reality of our world. But I do have other things that are like purely in this realm, if I would say, like things that are like maybe like crime thriller, if I'll call it that. I do have crime thrillers that are like pure crime thrillers. I do have a comedy or some things like this. But I like the idea of grounding things in reality and then having a touch of the supernatural, because I think that's the reality of our world. I mean, we live in a world where if you if you go to the market and someone touches you weird, you might check your privates just in case, just to see if it's still there. So that's the
Okay,
world we live in, you know. So
it
like,
is.
it just doesn't make sense to me not to explore that in my films.
Great. Thank you. Now, something you said, you in speaking about Ojuju, you mentioned that it's not supernatural. It has to come from it was linked to the thing of drinking dirty water. And that brought to my mind a question of, or the question of, do you try to bring in, or rather, let me phrase that differently. Do you try to point the torchlight at social realities that need fixing in your films? Is that also a concern for you?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I always have a message. I always have an agenda, which is a
Okay.
which is, I guess, a weird thing to say as a filmmaker, but I don't care. I mean, I think filmmaking is too hard. Like, it takes so many people, takes so much time, takes so much resources to make, that I just think it's irresponsible not to have something that you're saying. It's just, that's just how I feel. I feel like you shouldn't waste all of that time, all of those resources, all of those years. At least certainly for me, it takes time to make, right? So if I'm not going to waste all of this time and not say something, whether it's about my view on things or the society or the world, I'm going to say something. I'm not going to be preachy about it, but I'm going to say something. And I'm going to make my opinion very clear. I'm not going to, I mean, I do like some films that kind of leave things to be open for sure. I mean, I love Tarkovsky like the next guy, but I'm not going to do that because it's not me. You know, I didn't grow up in Eastern Europe where you kind of have to have like a bland reality. I grew up in a very white and black world. And I want to explore the nuances between those worlds and then give my opinion about what I think about those nuances. Um, and so, yes, I do. I like to think, even when I make a horror film, because I do have another horror film that I'm working on or I'm writing, because I haven't done like a pure horror film since Ojuju, and I'm excited about making another pure, like more pure horror film. But even when I do that, like the one that I'm currently working on, which is essentially a ghost story, I want to make a conscious horror film, like a horror film that is aware of it, of its consciousness and aware of its conscience as well. So, and I realized, even like when I had my kid, I realized that my taste in horror films changed. And this is me. I grew up on like really gory stuff. Evil Dead. It doesn't get more gory than the Evil Dead. Um, but I think even within the Evil Dead, there's a message. And even within like the classics, like the George Romero classics from the 60s, like Night of the Living Dead, which I'm forever a fan of, it's about, you know, like the industrial, when you talk of the industrial zombies, you're talking about society. You're talking about the plasticity and the you know, capitalism. You're talking about how the world has been numbed to sensitivity, to caring, to, you know, to humanity. That's really what the industrial zombies are all about: capitalism and what it does to society. So, in my opinion, the best filmmakers are those who always have something they are saying in their films. You know, like even Scorsese, like his movies are probably like so entertaining, like even his gangster films. But his gangster films, some people tend to miss the point of it. You know, like the Casino, the Goodfellas, Irishman, and he's never glorifying criminality.
Yeah. Yeah.
None of them ever end well. None
Yeah.
of them. You see, so like there's always a message. If you care enough about the storytelling and the craft, there's always something you say.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now, there are two questions here which are linked, so I'll take them together. Chinwike asks, Hi CJ, where can we see your earlier films like Ojuju? And Faustina asks, where can we find your short films to watch?
Ojuju, you can watch. There was only one place you can watch. It was, unfortunately, it was taken out of Prime. It was on Prime for a while, at Amazon, and it was taken out because it was optioned by a big studio that didn't want it to be on Prime, so it was taken out of Prime. But I did manage to reach a bargain where I kept it on a streaming platform called Quelly TV. So it's still there. But the big studios, they don't care because it's on Quelly TV. So like they don't care. But it's there because I still want people to watch it when they, at least before the series comes out. Yeah. So there'll be a series. But but yes, it's there on Quelly TV, Ojuju. Um Old Town, an early version of Old Town is, I think it's also on Quality TV, but there's a new version that hasn't been released yet, and we're putting final touches on it. It's going to have a re-release. That's the definitive. Over the years, there have been so
Okay.
many versions of Old Town. So, but there's a definitive version of Old Town coming out that I'm working on in Paris. Um, and then the short film Hello Rain, it's on Prime. You can watch it on Prime. But I also think it's on Quality TV, if I'm not mistaken. Either or both. Um, and then Juju Stories is on Prime. It's on Prime. Juju Stories. Mami Water is not out yet until September 8th. Go to the cinema and watch it. Oh yeah, there's a short film we made called Visions. It's an anthology short film. It's on YouTube. It's on the Sorio 16 YouTube page called Visions. It's a 19-minute short film that have three directors telling three different stories. So me, Abba Makama, and Michael Amonwa. We made three collage of stories in this 19-minute anthology short film. Kind of like Juju Stories, but short film version. And it's on our YouTube page. It's there. So that's where you can see all of these things. But I'm surprised.
Thank,
Like it, people always come to me and ask where we can see things. Like you can literally search them and you'll find them. If you care enough, you can find them. Like if you Google it, you will find it. In this age, like there's nothing hidden anymore. Like you can find anything.
thank you, CJ. We are slowly coming to the end of our time here, and we still have quite a few questions. Well, let me take the one of Ortiga. Ortiga says, Hi, CJ, always a pleasure watching you discuss filmmaking. What are some interesting happenings you look forward to in Nigerian cinema in the next 5 years?
Oh, I want to see what the young guys do. Because if people thought I was problematic, see that laugh? That's my sinister laugh. If people thought I was problematic, wait till you meet the guys coming after. These guys, they don't care. And I love it for them because they're going to destroy things, but in a good way. Um, but yeah, I'm really excited to see because I programmed with my Story 16 member, Michael Omonua. We programmed a collection of short films for this festival in Switzerland called Winterthur. And it's one of the oldest, biggest short film festival in the world. So Michael and I, we programmed a collection of short films, Nigerian short films for this festival, and it's going to launch in November at the festival in Winterthur, Switzerland. And the festival is bringing some of these young filmmakers to the festival as well. So this will be their first time ever at the festival and to be at this global festival. Anyway, my point is that because we had to program this thing, we got to see a lot of like raw talent, young Nigerian filmmakers making crazy stuff, right? So it got me really excited. That's what I'm saying. It got me really excited about the future because a lot of these guys they're not following the rules, and that's what it's about, right? That it's about people just doing their thing and not feel the need to be boxed into That's how the industry grows, I think.
Thank you. Taiwo has two questions. He says, I have totally enjoyed this. Well done, Doctor and CJ. My questions are, at what point of your career did you consider international representation to be important? And how has this representation helped you open these doors? That's one question or two questions in one. A second one is, what's your casting process? And what actors are you looking
Those are like
forward to working with?
those are like two very different questions. Okay, international reputation. Like I don't know if you were here in the beginning where I said I was basically forced to go international at a very early at the very early stage. I was forced. I mean, I always wanted to like walk my way into being an international filmmaker, but I was literally forced. By the time we made Ujuju and I said, "Oh, I'm not a Nollywood filmmaker," everybody came for me, and then I was literally forced to become an international filmmaker by looking for support outside. Because at the end of the day, I considered myself a Nigerian filmmaker. And I still think that being a Nigerian filmmaker is the greatest label you can have. It's greater than any other label. Because that is a unique perspective that nobody will ever take away from me, ever. But with that, I'm like, what is this? Like in the global cinema space, I know where a Senegalese filmmaker is positioned. You know where he's positioned? He's positioned under Usman Semben. He's positioned under Mambeti Diop. They are legends who made films in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. So a Senegalese filmmaker in the global film space is positioned under there. Do you know where I'm positioned under? I'm positioned under VHS Nollywood. Whereas I should be positioned under Hubert Ogunde, under Ola Balogun. But nobody knows this, right? So that for me was the whole point of having a more international discussion as far as Nigerian cinema was concerned. But it couldn't just be a discussion because a discussion is just talk. You have to show it with the work. You have to make the films. And so that's really it wasn't as much a planned strategic thing as it was an organic thing that happened because of the situation I found myself in at the time. If that makes any sense.
Okay, we have the second part of Taiwo's question. What's your casting process? Are you looking to work with
Yeah.
any particular actor?
Ah. I like a lot of new actors that I'm seeing now. I'm assuming you're talking about Nigerian actors, unless you mean like everywhere. Because now,
Like,
now we don't
let's
dey lose
assume
small,
as a
so
Nigerian
so we look
actors.
at everybody. um, to be honest with you, like there are a lot of good actors, especially younger actors, like really good. Um, I'm trying to think of specific names. Um, there's an I like Folu Storms, and I told them that I would really like. I like Folu Storms. She did a series that is on Showmax, I think, um, and she's like serious actor, serious actor. Um, I like Stan and Zen. Um, I'll probably do something with him soon if he has time for me. Um, try to think of a few more names. I also like people that I've worked with, like Kelechi Debe. I think he's just one of the best, and I'll always do stuff with him. Um, um, I really, I really like. Um, who else do I like? There are many of them. I can't like for some reason the names are not coming to me, but I just know that I'm seeing a lot of good stuff, like as far as performance wise, and the young actors they are killing it. Um, and yes, Yeah, people are. I want to work with a lot of young actors. Yes.
Okay, Taiwo was quite happy to hear you. He says, I represent Fulu Storms. Happy to hear this.
I've told
This
her
is
this
Taiwo.
before. I've actually DM'd her this. You can ask her. I've actually DM'd her like, look, we have to do something. No, she's fantastic.
Okay. Our time is up, but let me
Because I
just
reach
take a
out to
question.
people.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Yeah,
please.
go.
Okay. I was saying our time is up, really, but let me just take the question of Ebuka, who wants to know, well, he expresses that he rolls with your school of thought as for storytelling, but wants to ask if Mami Wata will have any Tesser act characters, fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional
So sorry,
characters.
you broke up. You broke you got yeah,
Oh, I'm
you
sorry.
broke up a bit.
That Ebuka is asking. I want to ask if Mami Wata will have any Tesser act characters, fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional characters. Tesseract characters are those that have more depth beyond three-dimensional characters. Characters in the mode of,
Oh,
say, Thanos from the Marvel
he's
Cinematic
academic with
Universe.
it. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not good with the academic terminologies, but I would like to think that definitely the characters are three dimensional, especially the main characters. Some of them are archetypes in a way, in that I like when characters don't just represent their own ideas and things, but represent larger ideas. Because I think then we can relate with those characters more because they transcend themselves. You know, like you can build things into a character. You can go, okay, this character is he limps or he smokes or those are just things, right? They are just things. When you really want to make a character larger than life, you have to look at that character, and side by side with that character, you have to look at the idea that stands alongside that character. Then that character transcends whatever that character is to become more. And I think those are the things um, that make storytelling work on a global level because your characters are not just going around doing things. They are archetypes and they represent ideas that are universal and that transcend whatever locality where that character is emerging from.
Great. Thank you so much, CJ. Thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. We have enjoyed this tremendously. It's been very enlightening. And of
You're
course, it's
welcome.
always great talking with you. We don't do it enough, but we should.
Yeah,
It's always
yes,
great
Raf.
speaking with you. Uh, Thank you so
My
much.
pleasure.
And once again, as CJ has encouraged us all, Mami Wata on the 8th in the cinemas. We should all, as
Yes,
they say, show
guys.
face.
Yes, and hit me up on social media when you watch it. Let me know your
Fantastic.
thoughts.
Fantastic. So thanks very much to our audience. Thank you for your questions, very deep questions. You preempted some of mine, so thank you. And CJ, thank you once again. And much greetings to Oge. We should have invited her actually,
Do
so it would be
him.
both of you.
All right.
Okay, then. All the best. Thank you,
She
everyone.
has her own stories. You should do a
Oh,
different
yes, we
episode
should
for her. She
actually. We
has.
should. So please tell her
Yeah, yeah.
we're going to come for her. We're going to come and invite her for something. We should.
Cool.
Thanks again, CJ.
All right.
Take care.
You're welcome. All right.
Thank
Best.
you. Okay. Bye.